dynamic panel that you absolutely want to stick around for, especially the Q&A portion. Before I get started, I have the pleasure of introducing your moderator. And I had an opportunity to spend a little bit of time with him and learn some interesting facts about him, as well as his most memorable DRJ experience. So it dates back to the mid-90s when he started the DRJ around 96. And they then had him join the board in 1997 because, as Patty told me yesterday, we are always looking for volunteers. And when he first joined, he was asked to be a member of the editorial advisor board. He was young, newly married, and a new dad. Has anybody ever been new at something? Anybody? I have, for sure. He was impressed with the fact that after reading the magazines, he was able to meet the instrumental people behind the scenes. And that gave him a chance to really explore this conference and the people that you see all around you today. His other memorable moment was the conference right after 9/11. Does anybody remember that? That was a tough conference. It was somber. A lot of you drove down because the flights were grounded and the whole agenda was thrown aside, and you guys talked about what happened and the challenges and the people that you know that were impacted. And as contingency planners, our moderator said that this was a milestone and it was a mark on industry professionals, as you guys had to work for all of the things that we've always planned about. The emotions were raw, however, it brought the private and the public sector together. Our moderator is a proven, results-driven, and strategic-minded executive with over 30 years of global governance, risk, and compliance, audit, technology, and business administration experience, which means you can ask him anything. Within resiliency, within industry, advisory, consulting, and as a services vendor. He has served in senior leadership roles within financial services, transportation, hospitality, and manufacturing industries. His consulting breadth spans a multitude of industries, mostly highly regulated, and government agencies from local, state, to federal, both domestic and international. He lives in Atlanta, Georgia, my hometown. However, he cheers for the Falcons, but not when they are playing the Steelers, as that is where he is from in Pennsylvania. He's also a Phillies fan, but he will cheer for the Braves unless they're playing. So at least he is loyal. His leadership, he will be leading our panel as the moderator, and this interactive panel discussion includes senior level leaders who have established high-value risk management programs. So you will want to stick around for the Q&A session. Please help me welcome our moderator, Jeff Dato, the Senior Vice President and Chief Risk Officer of Volunteer Corporate Credit Union. Executive views at managing risk in an uncertain world. Jeff Dato.
How I'm going to deal with all that. So I guess, first of all, good morning. I know that we're the last group before lunch, so we'll do what we can to keep this interesting and active. So really, just so you guys understand, the only reason I'm here is I'm the eye candy. That's it. These are the brains. So we're going to introduce them here in a little bit, but just want to kind of, building on what Ann said, and you'll find out I'm Italian. I love talking with my hands. Problem is I'm behind a podium, which I hate, but it is what it is. It's the way it's set up. But I'm going to build on what Ann talked about. If you looked in the descriptions of the two write-ups, they're really similar. Fortunately, Ann's a neighbor, a fellow Atlantan. We had a chance to talk a little bit. Her slant went more toward the crisis management, crisis response piece. We're going to take you a little bit different direction. First of all, I'm going to go through, any Billy Joel fans, by the way? Any Billy Joel fans? Okay. I'm going to reference a song, We Didn't Start the Fire, because that's what I'm going to kind of start with. I want to tee up the topic, and then what I'm going to do is we're going to have the panelists introduce themselves, and then we have a series of questions. And also, please feel free to send your questions in because we have time built in at the end. Okay. All right. So really, what I want to go is I started in '89 in the banking space, and I was introduced to DRJ in '96, '97 time frame. But when I got into this space, it was about insurance. It's about crisis management. And this is '88, '89 time frame. The other sorts of risks, the strategic risks, even financial interest rate risk, brand and reputation. Back then we used to call it data security, for those who might remember that. That was all separate. We all kind of had our own little silos. And so when I got into, so I started out with United Virginia Bank, which became Crestar, which became SunTrust. It was really kind of cool because I had the opportunity to report to the risk manager, not through IT. So I just got a chance to learn about risk from a very different perspective than a lot of my colleagues did back at that time. And really our focus was natural disasters, power outages, building fires. I mean, that was the sort of thing that we really focused on back then. But over time, over my 30 years, I've seen three general themes kind of evolve over time. Pre-2000, I'll just kind of bucket it that way, the very operational response crisis focus. As we moved into the 2000s, right, we started becoming more around technology as far as availability, compliance, and we went from this recovery, resumption sort of mindset to high availability, which was a brand new concept. Remember the .com sort of stuff. And then in the 2010s, we even moved and you've shifted a little bit more. We started talking a lot more about the strategic brand reputational risks. So we went from availability and resiliency to now really focused on ERM and the enterprise risks that are there. So here's where the reference to We Didn't Start the Fire. So I'm a huge Billy Joel fan. Anybody that doesn't know that song, Billy wrote the song basically from his beginning, when he was born, all the way through. And if you listen to the song, it has various milestones as you go through the song of things that happened throughout his life. So if you look at the pre-2000s, right, so if you kind of look way back, we had minimal corporate contingency planning. Most everything was around, again, crisis management and insurance. The seminal event of the pre-80s was the New York blackout. I don't know if anybody was around, remembers that, but that really was the start and the impetus for the rise of the hot site. That was what really kicked that off, and I think it's 78, 79 was the very first hot site. So that really kicked off to a higher gear of really what business continuity, what's now known as business continuity is all about. As we moved into the 80s and 90s with that in mind, we started going toward, financial services were leading the charge. There was some ITDR, through Bank Circular 177, which was the forefather of the FFIEC handbook, which many of us in financial services know, love, and dearly. And I thank the OCC for a career that I've loved for 30 years. So if there's anybody here from the OCC, thank you. But that kind of drove, because that was in '83 and then again in '89, they updated that. But bottom line is that it really started talking about foundational concepts of how do we manage a crisis or how do we manage business recovery. It was technology recovery, business resumption. And for me in the 80s, the seminal event for me that kind of had us do one of these ahas was the Tylenol scare. And some of us were born at that time and some of us weren't. But in 1982, for those who might remember, Johnson & Johnson, there was a tampering that had to do with the Tylenol back then, before Advil and all some of the other stuff. And bottom line is, it was someone had ended up injecting cyanide in some of the pills. And so there was a national scare to the point to where they pulled all aspirin and all pain relievers off the market. But the big reason that was huge, it was a reputational event that the corporate world had never seen before. And it had nothing to do with losing a building, it had nothing to do with fires, it had nothing to do with any of that. But it had everything to do with the brand and the reputation. And the reason that's so important is, as you kind of fast forward to where we are today in current times, that's a big focus. And the big thing I really liked about it is that if you look at the Oxford studies back in the 90s, Oxford University did some studies around price and market cap, and also your share value following a crisis. That's still to this day the model. because it is where, even though after a crisis, your stock price is here if you're publicly traded, it tends to drop immediately, as you could probably imagine. But what they did is that because they responded so well, and like some of the examples that was given a little bit earlier from Susie and Ann, is that because they responded so well, and the way they responded was, they now introduced those little bottles and stuff now that nobody can open, the tamper-resistant packaging. It completely revolutionized the way manufacturing is done. So that was a really seminal event in how we deal with brand and reputations. We had other things. We had Hurricane Hugo. We had First Interstate Fire. Cole's not here, is he? No. In the 90s, we had other industries join. We had more fires. We had Hurricane Andrew, which was for South Florida. That was a really big event. As we went into the 90s and we start getting ready for the 2000s, the really big seminal event for me in the 90s was Y2K. Remember the event that was the non-event? People tend, except for people in this room, to understand that the reason it was a non-event is because of the people in this room. Because of all the work and all the hard work that everybody put in here, so thank you for everybody who was involved in that. But that was absolutely a seminal event because it was not only about IT, because it started out as an IT issue, but it really brought everybody together. You had to look at your supply chain, you had to look at global businesses that you had to think about connectivity and people. So that was a really big change in mindset. So now we move to that second stage, which is the 2000s. So think about what was going on. Al Gore had just invented the internet. He said it. But we think about that. We survived Y2K, right? Now we get into the dot-coms, right? Remember all those fun sort of things? The internet started exploding. This concept of high availability, always being available, you can never fail. And operational resiliency from the business side, how do you keep that going? So the 2000s were really critical there, because now you also started getting into the concept of dealing with third-party providers. There was more and more reliance on outside services and products to keep you going. Just in your supply chain just continued to grow. For me, the seminal event we had the Northeast blackout, right? We had things like that going on. We had Enron Anderson, the collapse of Enron and the collapse of Arthur Anderson, one of the greatest brands ever. And that created Sarbanes-Oxley, or what I like to call, because I was in Big Four at that time, the great Accounting Employment Act of 2003. But it was one of those things where it really, now risk management started getting into the mainstream of the business. They had to think about controls. They had to think about why we're doing things the way we're doing. We're not lying and cheating and fraud, etc. For me, the seminal event, and I wear my lapel pin here from when I was at KPMG during this time, was 9/11. And that was one where I'm sure everybody in this room, we were all alive, but at the point that if you were in this space, it was truly our worst nightmare come true. It was the black swan that we said that would never happen. It happened. I remember sitting in boardrooms in the 80s and 90s explaining to my board members, why, what happens if the building blows up, or what happens if it, I actually had the board members say, what happens if an airplane flies into our building? I mean, what the hell is that? Well, that all changed on that day. And the thing that was so important about that is that it brought everybody together. Not only as a country, but as contingency planners, risk managers, everybody threw the titles out, brought public-private people together. It was a wonderful, wonderful event from that standpoint. So a lot came out of it. In the 2010s, we had financial crisis started in the late 2008, 2009. It kind of boiled over and really took its animal into 2010. We had the globalization of business really started taking off. The world all of a sudden wasn't flat anymore, right? It was all of a sudden, we're all interconnected. Geopolitical events, we're dealing with those now. Global terrorism, we started having domestic protests. It's like all these things are starting to happen. Also, all these more frequent natural disasters that we had talked about 20 years ago, they're starting to happen more and more. The wildfires, the floods, the flooding. Good God, anybody from the Midwest, prayers are out there for you. All this sort of stuff started happening. And really where I am with this is that our seminal event at this point in time, and Susie mentioned it, is really cyber, and as far as I'm concerned, cyber and privacy. And now it's become about data. It's become access and protecting critical assets, but it's really just protecting your brand and your reputation. And to me, when I was at IHG, so my first part of my career during that first third, I was a contingency planner in the banking space. My next third, when we went into availability and resiliency, I was in Big Four consulting. And my last third, I've been in the C-suite. I've been blessed to have a great career, but I've been across multiple industries, and it's interesting how my career's kind of paralleled that. And so really my takeaway, from here is that, corporate risk in the corporate world has changed over time, it's evolved. Business continuity professionals need to do the same thing. We need to understand what our role is, and for those who understand risk 101, there are 4 things you can do with risk. All right? You can mitigate it, you can transfer it, which is the insurance side, you can avoid it, just not go there, or you can accept it. 2 of those, business continuity is involved. We're involved in the mitigation side and helping them identify what needs to be mitigated, the risk assessment piece, that's our expertise, as well as the acceptance. If we choose to accept something, that means there's still that chance that something can happen. And that's where we come in from the planning side. We bring an expertise to the table around responding to crises, and we are one of the few examples of organizations within a company that actually have an enterprise view of how the world works. There aren't very many people, us and audit and a handful of others. We can actually put those pieces together. That's why I want to emphasize what Susie said, make sure that you're at the table or someone from your group is at the table when you are having to face one of these issues. So, with that said, I'm going to shut up, which is, those who know me, that's very difficult for me to do. So I'm actually going to let my fellow colleagues, the big brains, kind of go through and introduce themselves, and we're going to go, we're going to go from your right to left, and I'll just have them just take a few minutes, because I think their bios are, people are able to see their bios, but just really, who you are, how long you've been in business, how have you seen things starting to change?
Great, thank you. So my name is Delroy Ross. I am the Global Business Continuity Officer at Cigna Health Insurance Company. Been at Cigna for roughly 12 years now. Been in the BCP space for about 8 years. So there was a period there where I left to work at a dream job at ESPN for a couple years and figured, it was too tough on the family, so I came back to Cigna and it worked out there. Business continuity, corporate crisis, so I've been leading that team for 4 years of those 8 as I've been in the space. And I always tell everyone that, and don't take offense to this, I have 3 daughters at home, so that kind of preps me for my job for any crisis there. So, and a baby infant boy, so but he's not as bad as the girls, I'll say. You all know what I mean by that. So yeah, been in the space for 8 years, love it. No 2 days are alike, and really looking forward to answering some questions and going through this panel.
Hello. Sorry, I'm having some significant voice problems here, so hopefully you can hear me. I'm Dennis Gorgeous. I'm the General Manager over Enterprise Risk Management, and I've been in this position for 4 years, and prior to that I've been with Jack Henry & Associates for 24 years. I didn't realize that my first my first BC project was Y2K. That was my project. So I was going to say my seminal moment was when it had to do with Superstorm Sandy. And so when Sandy hit, we had a data center in that area, and that's where we had a significant impact. And it's surprising how that impact can impact people in Montana. Because if you have a data center, it doesn't matter. And trying to explain to people in Montana how Superstorm Sandy impacted them became kind of an interesting conversation. But that's where I started really getting involved in disaster recovery and business continuity. And I think that's where I'm at.
Morning, everybody. My name is Dan Bailey. I'm the Operational Risk Officer at Legacy Texas Bank. We're based in Plano, Texas, just outside of Dallas. And as Jeff and I were kind of talking through this earlier, and then the four of us were talking, it's amazing how much time has passed probably since I started coming to these conferences and everything. And it unfortunately makes me realize how old I don't think I really am, maybe. I've been involved with business continuity and disaster recovery all the way back to 1991, and I go back to, it wasn't even called IT yet, it was called data processing back in 1985. So, and we were, Ann was talking earlier about the conversation at breakfast, and I was part of that conversation. And it's really scary to think about, you know, some of the progress and the things we've overcome probably in the last 30 years or so. And so I'm excited to be here and look forward to working with these gentlemen up here.
Awesome.
And one thing I will say is I don't remember half the events that he mentioned.
Which made me feel even older. So, and as you can tell, like I said, the big brains here, you know, between the four of us, we have 93 years in the risk management space. So 90 of them are mine. So what we want to be able to do is kind of let them answer some questions, and hopefully it'll relate back. Again, feel free to send the questions out. Very first question, and this is a general question for all of you. You know, what are your impressions of the business continuity changes over the last 5 to 10 years? So we've heard a lot about all the things that's kind of happened back, and what we're going to do is we're going to bookmark this with a real quick look back, and then we're going to wrap it up with kind of looking forward. So whoever wants to go in first.
Sure. You know, with all the events you mentioned, the floods, the wildfires, the hurricanes, I mean, unfortunate events. And I think just from my space, you know, I've been in it for 8 years, led it for 4 years, and of those 4, we had the 2 terrible hurricane seasons. But I think the engagement, so employee engagement, executive engagement. So 10 years ago, if you told everyone to bring their laptops home, it was like, oh, it's too heavy, it's too clunky. But, you know, through those incidents, you understand that, all right, I am part of business continuity. I am a core function of business continuity. I'm just not an employee. So I think that's really helped. The events have also helped drive engagement with executive leadership because they understand the bottom line is, you know, we need to provide services to our customers, and they have given us the support. You know, we're allowed to email blast, we're allowed to, you know, communicate however we need. And the final piece I want to touch on is just, you know, before, I feel like BCP was, you focus on the customer, obviously, you focus on business process. But what I've seen is we focus more on the employee welfare now. So many things are happening, and yes, we want to service the customers, we need the process to run, but you got to make sure your employees are mentally engaged. And some of them have seen things, have lost homes, have seen, you know, fatalities, things have happened. So, you know, what we try to do with every event, wildfires, even New Zealand last weekend or 2 weekends ago, is reaching out to our employees and making sure that they have the resources they need. Not just, hey, you need to get back to work, but from an EAP, behavioral health, hey, here are some numbers that you should probably save in your phone. You know, you're in our thoughts and prayers, but, you know, if you need us, please reach out to the services. Not just focus on the work, but focus on the employee.
So prior to, as I mentioned, Superstorm Sandy was a big moment for us. Prior to that, we allowed kind of business units, they did their own thing. You know, we didn't have consistency throughout the organization. And so what we had is a lot of people making individual decisions, and we had a level of trust with them. Yes, they're going to do the right thing. And the problem is we weren't verifying, and we didn't have that governance aspect. And so governance really became a key factor after 2012 for us. And the engagement of the executive team became highly engaged. It became a strategic decision. How are we going to make sure this never happens again? How can we make sure that we have that resiliency that we can instantaneously move over to another center and have kind of a seamless transition? So, you know, another thing is it relates to our employees. So I'm fortunate to have a couple of people who are here at this conference who have part of my team that are very focused on making sure that our associates are taken care of and communicating. And so we have a process where when we had the 2 big hurricanes back to back, or 3 I guess it was, that we had communication going out to them, explaining to them what was going to happen. And that the feedback we got from that, from our associates, was terrific. They were like, oh, you care. And so it's a really important aspect of it. So, you know, when the fires out in California, we have an office out there, we're communicating. So it's really been that evolution into taking care of our clients and taking care of our associates, and it's been a real positive experience for our team.
Totally echo everything that Delroy and Dennis have said as far as seeing those changes in and through what's been going on. A lot of what I've seen as well is advances in technology have really had a significant impact on what we do as business continuity professionals. I remember back when in the early days of a business continuity planning tool, right? And it was just a standalone system, didn't have any kind of crisis management or incident management integrated into it or anything. We just, found a way to put a plan together by way of a business impact analysis, maybe a risk assessment, then, you came up with plans. Even back then, it was a lot of plans based on scenarios, right? We did a lot of scenario-based planning until kind of the evolution of what we've done has come to the point, and we talked about this earlier this morning as well. Now it's so much, you have one plan, and you may be doing scenario-based testing to make sure that your one plan can handle multiple scenarios, right? It's a lot more efficient from that perspective, and that's what I appreciated about Andrew, in his comments earlier in the first session. It is a lot about efficiency. So from that perspective, we know more about the organization than probably most anybody else does, except maybe the executive suite, and sometimes I might argue that one too. But we cover and we touch everything across the organization. So, by way of efficiencies, by way of newer technologies, we're really enabling a lot more capability for people to be engaged not only in the process, but also at time of disaster. What happens, at various stages along the process. So.
Cool. That's a good answer. And the concept of all hazards, I think everybody here will agree that's the way we're definitely going. All right, so I'll ask some individual questions here. I'm going to start with Delroy. Cigna's a global company. How do you manage risk and align your enterprise risk program with regulations in other countries?
Good question.
A lot of people here might be dealing with that.
Yeah, so you really have to look at it from a one size does not fit all. I've spoken to our international CEO, and he understands that we have standards in the U.S. that are obviously different in Indonesia, Thailand, New Zealand. I got to say the one driving force there is having a good contact locally to know the laws and regulations. We give them our standards, but they have to fit them within their government boundaries. So really working on a weekly, bi-weekly basis with someone in each country, making sure that we understand, when that auditor comes in, what they're looking for. It may be above and beyond our framework of standards, because like I said, I don't know everything in Turkey, everything in the UK. I know what the US, we have state audits, but they have a bigger government audits in UK. So it's really getting a better handling of who is there and what they may be asking.
Dan, I'm going to kind of go to you. Why is business continuity such a good fit under our own? So, where Dan sits again is operational risk. So just, how does that work?
Sure.
And why is it such a good fit?
I think, honestly, the best part of this is the fact that operational risk management and business continuity focus on the same three things: people, process, technology, right? I think that's probably the most significant reason I believe that business continuity does fit really well up underneath operational risk. The other piece of it is operational risk covers almost every aspect of the organization, and as I mentioned earlier, we as business continuity professionals, we're out in those business units, and we're determining what they do from a business process perspective, and we're gauging criticality of processes and technologies. Interestingly enough, over the years, one thing has not changed, and that's the fact that the number one most valuable resource in any company I've ever either worked for or consulted with is people. And that being the case, business continuity in its own right, on the business side of things from a business resumption perspective, is concerned about the people and what they do and how they do it, even in the midst of a disaster. And then you've got the technology side of it, which is great, but technology continues to evolve. Business processes continue to evolve, but it's people at the heart of everything that continues to drive and make the whole business move forward. The other piece of that I think is really interesting is the level of integration that we can have with a lot of the sibling programs that are underneath operational risk management. I'll throw a few of them out here. We've talked a lot about cyber security today, and there's a huge aspect of incident and crisis management as well as just general technology that's built into cyber that business continuity integrates extremely tightly with. Cybersecurity compliance, vendor and contract management. When we think about what we do as business continuity professionals and we're identifying criticality of process, we also want to know, do we have a heavy reliance or a significant interdependence with certain vendors in the organization? And for our organization, this guy right here, we use Jack Henry for our core operating system, the core banking system. So, we've got Jack Henry built in very tightly to what we're doing from a business continuity perspective, and we're even heavily involved in and monitoring and tracking their failover exercises that they do a couple of times a year. So those are just some high-level perspectives on why I really do believe business continuity fits really nicely up underneath an operational risk umbrella.
Just a quick show of hands. Folks who their departments, business continuity departments, roll up to operational risk. Handful up to ERM, up to enterprise risk. Somewhere else, everybody else, right? All right. So if you notice, we've kind of gone from business continuity to operational risk. So now we're going to go to ERM question. And this question really is for Dennis, and again, I'll try to spare you on your voice. But what's been the most surprising aspect of your risk management program as it continues to mature?
Well, we have one of the things when we implemented ERM, it was, okay, we're going to do these things. And, we had certain things that we lined up, in disaster recovery, enterprise continuity, cybersecurity, occupational risk. But as you start peeling that back, it's amazing how much you don't know. And all those risks, they continue to pop up, and it's making us a stronger company, but it's a struggle. Because every time you come up with something, it's like, oh, we need to take care of this activity while still doing all these things over here. So enterprise risk, sometimes ignorance is bliss, but then you have Sandy, and then that throws everything out the window. So having executive involvement and support of the program, and the board of directors, I can tell you the board of directors is very engaged. Cybersecurity, the board is very engaged in that. So I present to the board regularly, and they don't know about that. But so as we evolve, the depth of activities that we get involved in, it just continues to expand. And that's been our biggest challenge, is how do we, with the same number of people, continue to add pieces to the puzzle? And so it just continues to grow over time, and I think that's really been the biggest challenge, is how are we going to address all these issues with maybe just incremental increases of budget, but still protecting the company, and that's what we're trying to do with enterprise risk, and protect the company.
Yeah, and actually the cyber privacy issue, if anybody, both Protiviti, NC State, I'm involved with the NC State ERM Advisory Initiative, and for the last 9 years they've done a joint study with Protiviti, and cyber and data privacy have been in the top 3 for the last 9 years, every year. So that's really big.
If I could jump in here real quick,
yeah,
too,
absolutely.
just to add on to what Dennis was saying. Some of the things that, I would venture to say many of your organizations are focused on efficiency, or your efficiency ratio, if you will. Don't forget that becomes part of risk, right? Yeah, because you can peel that onion back a little too far, and you're left with, or as we used to always say, you can shave the hand so thin you could see through it. You end up with some of that could be, a significant risk in the portfolio as well. So
that's good. Good point. So this will be another all question. Going along that path, with cyber and privacy risk at an all-time high, how are you tailoring your program to proactively prepare for the business? So. Who wants? That's how we've been going this way, so we're going to flip it. We're going to flip it this case.
Okay. So, as a bank, we are highly focused and regulated with regard to cybersecurity. We've got a lot of things that our information security officer wants to do, and we've got a lot of things that he and the IT department are working together collaboratively to do. And probably one of the things I would call out specifically is that level of collaboration that needs to take place. Because cyber risk to the business units is different than cyber risk is to the risk department, than cyber risk is to IT, right? So making sure that there's a collaboration built across the organization is extremely significant, so that everybody does end up talking the same language or singing from the same page on the songbook, so to speak. We're making sure that we can monitor effectively. I would say the biggest concern I have for cybersecurity is that most, if not all, of our companies are reactive to what's going on versus trying to get ahead of the game. Anything I hear, anything I read, anything I experience with what we're doing is that these bad actors, cyber actors, they're probably 8, 9, 10 steps ahead of us already, right? Mm-hmm. They've already thought so far ahead, and so we're having to react to it. And so, you know, one of the evolutions that has come around in cyber, which is great, is that we're no longer trying to focus on endpoint security. I think that's a really big thing, right? We were trying to, all of the places and pieces and technology parts that could access, we tried to protect all of those. When really what it boiled down to is the most valuable resource we were trying to protect was the data itself. And so if you just focus on protecting that data, that's going to be key, that's going to be core, and that's where that relationship, that collaboration with IT is going to be absolutely huge. Okay.
So I have within enterprise risk, I have both business continuity, disaster recovery, and I have the Chief Information Security Officer, and she's responsible for cybersecurity. So cybersecurity is really high on our list of activities. As I mentioned, the board of directors is very involved in it. One of the things that we're really focused on doing is tabletop exercises. We started off just doing internal, and we've done a number of internal, and now we're getting very much engaged with participating with third parties. FSISAC in the financial services industry, that's a big one, and what we've done now is we were participating with them. Now we're participating with them and then asking our clients to participate with us. So when this comes up in October, we'll be doing an exercise that we're coordinating with FSISAC. So we're continuing to broaden the scope and broaden the participation. And I really think that's important because we were learning things every time we did a tabletop internally. We'd learn and we'd learn some more. It's, oh gosh, why didn't we think of that? And then we're also we're getting people involved who weren't involved in the prior. But tomorrow, I'm actually participating in a Federal Reserve tabletop exercise in St. Louis. So we look for opportunities that we can participate with others, and so we can learn across the way. It's a two-way street. They wanted us to participate because we're a strong service provider in that region, but we learn from those also. And so it's important. I think that's one of the biggest things that you can do is look for outside parties that you have a dependency on, or they have a dependency on you. Because people have a dependency on us, and we're trying to learn what they need. And so I think that's really an important aspect of cybersecurity.
So for us, from a Cigna standpoint, I think we're focusing on two things. One is manual workarounds, and second is senior leader tabletop. So first, with the manual workarounds, we've really pushed back on the business and looked at their business process and said, okay, if we take away 2 of your applications for a week or two, what can you do and what can you not do? And you need to document that because that's really the only way to know if we're ready for a cyber event or if we're not. We struggle because we've become so automated with processes and more IT and AI that, oh man, manual workarounds. I don't think we can do that anymore. So
we don't even train people to do that anymore.
Right, exactly. So so we really push back on the business on that. So I've actually passed the team with in our tool and in our BCP fields. Manual workarounds needs to be documented for every business process. Even if it's a NA not applicable, that's totally fine, but it cannot be blank. We absolutely need to know what we know and what we don't know. Second is, I've been tasked with an exhaustive international roadshow with our cyber team. So we've been going to every market, and we just booked Thailand, New Zealand, and another country yesterday.
It's on a Rolling Stone.
Yeah, it's bad. But But it's really been exhaustive, but you know, it's been really good because we've been meeting with the CEO, the CFO to get all those senior leadership folks in one room to go through a cyber event with the SME cyber and with the BCP SME. It really drives that engagement, and you know, every time we do that, the biggest takeaway is communications. You know, does your employee know what to look for, and do they know who to communicate to if they see something on their screen that doesn't seem like it fits? So it's been a really great roadshow. This is our third phase, and we have one more later in the year. But it's really, you meet at that higher level, and it really filters down to the employees that, oh, cyber events can happen, have happened. Luckily, knock on wood, has not happened to us. But you know, it's kind of, don't take this the wrong way, it's kind of good when it happens to another company, because then it really drives that engagement internally. Like, we cannot be on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. So senior leadership has thrown more resources into our cyber joint tabletop with BCP over the years.
That's good. That's a good question. I like the roadshow piece. I hope you have your own roadies.
Yeah, I wish. I really felt like the Beatles. We're in one country and we're flying out the next day.
I'm just kind of watching the time. I'm going to go a little off script, so they're not prepared for this.
Contingency.
So kind of looking at the big brains here. And I'll even jump in. So I'm going to put myself under this too. If you had to pick one kind of big takeaway from given your years of experience, things that maybe you weren't necessarily told, or things because of the evolution of the way risk has come through, is there one thing that you can kind of think about for the folks in the audience that, okay, as an executive, I'm looking at this, you know, how can we have business continuity professionals better communicate with us, or, you know, what's the one, if you had one nugget to kind of advise to this group, what would you say?
I'll go first, and it's kind of a tease to my seminar later, is be ready to change. You know, so many of us in this room, you know, probably were brought into BCP, and you know, we keep doing things because they've been done. And because of the climate, climate, political unrest, the events are changing, we have to change. And there's tons of seminars this week of just people talking about, you know, different tools have changed. Really look inwardly at your group and say, is there anything that we should be doing differently? Can we add value in other areas with risk? Should we keep doing it because everyone's painted the room red every year, so we're going to keep painting it red? Like, our team, we're really committed to change. And I feel like that's the only way you can improve. So if there's one thing you take away, like, from us, is be able to change, be ready to change, and make sure you have the team that is ready to change, because you may have one person on your team that may not want to change processes or how they've been doing things. So it's really commit to change, unfortunately.
That's a good one.
In regard to change, one of the things that you have the 80-20 rule in effect. You know, you have 80%, they're jumping on board, they're ready to go. But that 20%, you know, they've been doing things for a long time in that way. And it's been successful. They haven't had a failure, and they haven't had a disruption. So they're going like, what we've been doing works. And that's one of the big challenges that we've had, is making sure that everyone is pulled into it. And one of the ways you do that is making sure that you know the personalities of those people, and those that need the extra stroking, extra hand holding, that you reach out to them before you roll something out. Because if you don't, you know which people in your organization are going to go, hey, wait a minute. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do more of, is reaching out to those key stakeholders and understanding their personalities and what they need in order to adopt.
That's good.
I'll probably just carry along some of the change perspective, but it's change for maybe how we look at what we do. I think where I'm going with this is, in what I've experienced with operational risk in general, is we're identifying the risks, we're measuring the risks, we're looking at the controls that are in place, and I may have one particular risk that only has one control associated to it, and then I've got the next risk with 15 associated controls to it. Are we looking as business continuity professionals at what might be over-controlled, so that we can peel back a little over here to apply those resources somewhere else, right? And that's not really been what we've been taught to do, I think, over the last how many years now. So, you know, we have a responsibility to the organization. Yes, sometimes it's hard to get funding, you know, as we've probably all encountered. But can we pull some resources from somewhere where the risk appetite says, risk appetite's here and we're controlling it at a higher level? Can I peel these away and bring it over here to a risk where I need to bring that risk's residual score up to the risk appetite level as well? So probably just a
good. That's actually, it's a great tee up to the to what I was going to mention. So I'm a former pitcher. So the only way I never threw 98 miles an hour, but I was really good at hitting the corners and art of deception, changing speed. So I actually had a problem. So you should have seen this. No, I guess my one nugget is, does everybody in here, this is my former employer, IHG, does everybody know what a 10K is? Is there anybody that doesn't know what a 10K is? Right. So within your 10K, right, your organizations have to list by law what the principal or the key risks are of the business. Right? Is everybody aware of that? Right. You want to have that engagement with the senior executive team? Figure out how to help us mitigate, transfer, avoid, or plan or accept the risks that are in here. Get to know what risk appetite's all about. But most importantly, learn to speak their language. If you come in and talk to them about, we need to do a BIO, or you know what, what's your cost benefit, or they'll understand cost benefit analysis, but what's your recovery backup time, what's your RTO, what's your RPO? You start talking like that, they're going to look at you like you have three heads. So if you can figure out a way to tie into your principal risks, you figure out talking to the language, you know that there's a pain point. Figure out a way that you can go in and provide value, because once you provide value once, they're going to come back. And they're going to understand how can business continuity / risk management, so it goes from being a cost center, so to speak, to something that's a true value proposition, value add back to the business. And that's the one piece of advice I've always given to everybody, is get to know what's in your 10K and learn to speak the language of your executive team. You guys agree with that? Okay. So again, I'm looking at the time. We're creeping up toward the end here. I want to make sure we leave room for questions. So this will be my last question before we open it up to the floor. So for all, where is this? And when I say this, the finger quotes, right? With cross connectivity, business continuity, supply chain risk, privacy, cyber, etc. All this stuff's kind of tying together. What do you expect to see to change over the next 5 to 10 years? We talked about, we're going to bookmark this. So we've looked backwards, so now we're looking forward. What do you guys see changing in your crystal ball? That was referenced a little bit earlier.
I guess it's, I'm not, no. With enterprise risk management, in the name is enterprise. So that's kind of that's kind of where we're going. And so the reason that we put ERM in place was because we needed that global look at the enterprise, and we needed somebody to bring it all together. So working with all the different groups, my team's responsibility is the governance of those. So making sure that they understand what needs to be done. And so we're developing policies, we're pushing those policies out, and I hate the fact that we're becoming, kind of paper pushers in terms of policy, but it has to be done because we need consistency throughout the organization. And we need groups that are over in San Diego doing the same thing as in Allen, Texas, as they are doing in Charlotte. And that consistency is really important. And the consistency within the enterprise. And I think that's really been where we're going, is making sure that consistency is continuously pushed out there, that everyone understands their role, and it all meshes together, because every business, every department within the company has responsibility to protect the company, whether it's protect the data, protect the processing, protecting the operations. And so what we're doing is we're pushing out short videos, 5-minute videos, and that goes across the enterprise. And I think that's really trying to get everybody, pulling everybody in to understand the roles.
I don't really have much to add to what he said. You know, I think it's really just increasing communication. You know, at Cigna, the enterprise risk, it's mandatory for that senior leader of cyber, or BCP, of security, to all be on the call, because sometimes it gets delegated down, and all of a sudden you have someone that's not a decision maker, or someone that, you know, doesn't know what to do with the information. So it's just ensuring that you have all the appropriate people at the meeting. Keep communication lines open as always, and you know, be able to change. You know, things are changing. So our ERM group is pretty strong and robust with processes and people. So it's just a matter of just keeping what we're doing and be able to change.
I think a lot of where I see this, as Jeff called it, heading, is great opportunity for everybody sitting in this room. You know, I foresee, as I've talked about the sibling programs underneath operational risk management, I foresee people in this room, myself included, gaining and learning more knowledge about vendor and contract management, or compliance, or information security and cybersecurity, and all of these other sibling programs, so much so that it really broadens the knowledge horizon and it broadens the career opportunities for everybody sitting in this room and anybody else that does business continuity as a practitioner. Totally agree with what Dennis said in regard to everybody is a risk manager. So are we going to continue to call ourselves business continuity professionals, or are we going to evolve and call ourselves risk managers? You know, those are some things that I think are absolute keys to where the future goes and where it takes us. Part of it is we have some input on where our future goes. So are we going to change? Are we going to adapt? Are we going to evolve in that particular realm of things? So much so that as more and more of these sibling programs start to tighten up, you know, we're all part of that conversation. And it's not just the little conversation, if you will, about BCP, but it's the broader conversation about operational risk management. And to what Delroy said, I know a lot of people use that term pushed down through the organization, and I would say if I had to kind of define my utopia environment, so to speak, it would be more of a hub and spoke environment rather than a linear environment, because you know, ERM at the hub for what Dennis does as a responsibility goes out to operational risk management, and then operational risk management has a hub and spoke relationship, and you don't know where one starts and the other begins necessarily. So from where I would love to see it go, if I'm answering that question, I would love to see that in particular. So.
It's a very different utopia than what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say you wanted to be the king in the Bud Light commercials, but that's not where you went.
Don't use corn syrup.
That's right. No, all right. So I mean, there's a really. I have some other questions, but you know, we have about 10 minutes left.
10 minutes until
and,
lunch. So.
Because if you don't send questions, I've got to continue and ask questions. So please use the hashtags. Please use the wonderful tool that's been out there. Do we have any? Bob? Yes. John? Instead of looking at me, can you put them up here? Maybe.
Well, by way of Andrew's definition earlier, then we've answered all the questions.
That's right.
Before anybody ever asked.
Lunch.
Yes, no, maybe? Awesome. You realize how fat you are until you're on the screen. You know that? It's just like
The camera adds 10 pounds.
5 chins. I was skinny when I started this, you know that? All right, finally. Okay, so I stalled. All right, so the first question, let's see. Do you feel our professional practices and methods have adapted to the changes we see in the organizations and industries we support? One of you guys want to attack that? You're the big brains. I'm just eye candy, remember?
I would say there have been some changes, but as we continue to evolve and mature, you know, I would put it on the shoulders and the responsibilities of the leadership at DRI and at the BCI to make sure that they continue to evolve and change. I was part of helping, I saw Mark Carroll out here yesterday, and I was part of writing a disaster recovery course for Boston University. And he was telling me that they're still teaching that course, and I said, please tell me you've updated that thing. And he said, yes, they have. So, you know, in that same vein, I think it's important that, you know, by way of what we do, how we do it, who does it, you know, it's important to make sure that those continue to evolve.
I mean, I'd add to that and say that I think, so reflective of the 3 organizations that are here, and then my organization as well. Now we have, how many employees does Cigna have?
48 plus recent Express Scripts.
No, Cigna worldwide.
Oh, yeah, well, 48,000.
48,000.
Not 48.
Well, I was going to say, because the company I work for, we have 55 employees.
Yes.
We have 55 employees. I work for companies that have 350,000 people. And I'd say my answer to this is, I think we've moved on, not everybody's moved on. The fact that we're having enterprise risk, cyber, the information security folks, we're having compliance, supply chain, because I have vendor management as well. All that's under one umbrella. So I'd say that there are pockets of organizations that are moving in the right direction. We've even gone to the point to where we dropped the word management. There's my finger quotes again. We've dropped that out of our title. We're just enterprise risk now, because we need to make sure people understand the three lines of defense. Right? It goes back to everybody's a risk manager. Your first line of defense being folks at the front line, literally. They're responsible. We've done education. Make sure they understand it's their day-to-day responsibility to manage risk. They manage risk. We're the second line of defense. We're the expertise. We have the tools and the knowledge to help guide them, advise them, coach them along that way. And then you have your third line of defense, which is your audit function. That's making sure that we're doing what we're saying that we're doing. So I think that's changed. How about the third one?
I was going to do the second.
Okay, do the second one then. Okay.
Just quickly, one change that Cigna's really invested in is remote capabilities. So about 5 years ago, we had roughly 58% of our employees that had remote capabilities, and what we've seen over the last 5 years is more snowstorms, more hurricanes. So what we've done, and executive leadership really pushed this, now we're at 91% of our employees can work from home. Just because offices are closing all the time. So really improved upon that, and hopefully we get to 100% sometime next year.
That's great.
And I have more to add to that. In terms of improving resiliency, yes, using technology to improve resiliency, so we can instantaneously switch over to our backup site. However, with that technology, as new challenges, single points of failure become much more challenging. One of the things that we've run into is a partial failure of a technology. If something fails completely, boom, we're switching over. But if it's just fluttering there, it doesn't switch over completely. It doesn't switch over to the alternate site. So then we're running into, okay, that becomes a problem. Or you have a diode that pops, and it just puts a little bit of smoke in the computer room. That little bit of smoke all of a sudden sets the alarms. And so something so tiny can cause a disruption. But again, you don't know, is that a fire? Or because a lot of these things are done remotely. There's not a human in there. And so we have to send somebody down there, and that's all time. So technology can be a saving grace, but also there's a whole set of things that you have to learn in regard to it.
Yeah, and I'll even add to that too, because we've talked about the technology resiliency, but I'll talk about the people and process side. From my advisory days and when I worked at some of the larger companies, one of the things we really worked on was the people and the process side of the resiliency as well. So for example, like where we work today, we have a really well documented cross-training program where we document it. And so we make sure that at least 2 to 3 people can do every other job. Again, we're a small company. That helps a lot. But also just as mergers and acquisitions, we got into that a little bit today. One of the things that's kind of nice about that is you're consolidating facilities. You can think about the fact that if you have functions that can back each other up. So think of a call center, for example. If you have 10 call centers around the world or around the country, if one of them is focused on a certain product or a certain service, can you build scripts basically so that you can flip the phones from the one to another so that they can back that up in a pretty simple task. So as you're doing your strategic plan and as they're starting to work on the consolidation, that's something where I know that we put out there for our budget and also for our strategic planning piece, we document the fact that where do we have holes? Where do we have that single point of failure? And so that as we are training folks, as we are combining, because we buy other banks, other credit unions bad word in credit union world, is to say bank. But, but as we take others, we make sure that we understand where our holes are, and that's kind of the focus. Which one? How about, did we talk about supply chain? Anybody want to talk supply chain?
I
Yes,
between
I'm sorry,
two
Dad.
of us.
Okay, I'm at 4 minutes, so I didn't know. I know everybody's hungry. So, all right, tell you what, I've got the high sign. So, thank you all very much for your time. I really do appreciate it. And everybody enjoy the rest of the time here at DRJ.
Awesome. So before you prepare for lunch, just a couple of announcements. Our breakout sessions will begin at 1:30. Lunch will be served in the Vera Cruz Exhibit Hall from 11:45 to 1 p.m., so we are right on schedule. Our exhibitor booths will close tomorrow at 3 p.m., so please keep that in mind. Also, please be sure not to leave any items in the rooms, as they will not be there when you return, because we're going to flip those rooms, so be sure to take your items with you. And we will see you tonight at the On Solve event at 6:30 p.m. in the Casitas Courtyard. We will see you back in this room on Wednesday morning.